Hello, Turkey. Oh, look, I can see myself. Hi. Wonderful to be here. I'm Suzanna. I'm based in Manchester in the UK. And this is my work wife, Morgan.
Hi, I live in Vermont in the US.
Yes, and together we are Pop-Up Adventure Play. We are very excited to be here today. Thank you for having me. Yeah. Okay. Well, I guess we should move on to the presentation now. And you will see us disappear very briefly. Oh, look at all this fancy stuff. Okay, so maybe we should do a little introduction. We've been asked to talk about Playwork 101, refocusing on children's play. This is a subject we're both very excited about, and we hope to spend the next hour and a half talking about.
Yeah, we've both been in the field of playwork for quite a while, for more than a decade. We've been doing this in different kinds of roles, and we bring to it the way that everybody does, like our own histories and preferences and things from our own childhood and stuff that we love now, to this like broad shared mission of supporting children's play.
And here we are, a photo of us side by side. This doesn't actually happen very often in this photo. And actually, I haven't seen Morgan for 18 months now because of the pandemic. But just because a virus will keep us apart doesn't mean we stop working together. And here we are on Zoom doing it together. So we very much look forward to hanging out again together. Yeah, we'll get there. We'll be in person soon.
Hold the faith. But even before the pandemic, we'd already spent a lot of time working long distance. We've been in separate countries for most of the time that we've been an organization. And our work really is about supporting play advocates and people who support children's play all around the world. So we've been online for a while.
Yeah, and there's people like you, people who are here today. I'm sure that in one way or another you care about children's play, and today you're here to find out what more you can do, what approach you can take, and what it means to be a play advocate as a play worker. And we know that in Turkey, play work isn't actually a thing yet. We know that there's a lot of people who are finding ways to share what playwork is. And this is one of those ways. We're going to talk about it very briefly today, talk about what we mean by play, what we mean by play work, and what that means going forward from there. A little summary of our presentation. And then also what that means as an organization, as Pop-Up Adventure Play. It's not just a long name for you to remember, it is there for a reason as well. Yeah, we'll talk more about us later, right?
Yeah, always. But the first place to begin is what is play? It's a word in English that gets used lots of different ways. And I know in other languages it can be translated variously as well. A question that we get asked very often is if we mean games, if we mean adult organized games, and we don't. Play can include games, but just like it can include art and music and all of these different adult names. But what we're really interested in is the child's experience. So are they doing what this is because they want to? Is it play for them?
Yeah, when we talk about play, and when you're thinking about play now, you don't need to tell us what you're thinking, but what do you mean by play? And how do you know it's play? These are two questions that we ask quite a lot. Morgan, what do you think play is? How do you define play?
This is also funny because both of us have been doing PhDs in Playwork. So it's hard to think of a definition that isn't 5,000 words long anymore. But for me, play is about a moment, right? It's a feeling of doing something that is you are absolutely absorbed in, that it takes all of your attention, that time like melts away, that worries like fade away. And it's something that you're motivated to do, even if it looks like nothing very much. And I think my definition of play also includes that it can be fun, and sometimes it's very hard. Sometimes the thing that you really want to do is a challenge, but you continue with it because you care.
Mm. For me, play, actually, it's really hard to describe. For me, I just need to do something. It's beyond words a lot, and I just there's like a suddenly an urge. I need to go and go for a walk, or I need to run around for a moment, or I need to draw, and the for me, sometimes the words actually get in the way of what I'm doing. But very often, like you say, for PhDs, for reports for managers, for social media, everybody wants us to write down these feelings and these urges. So it gets really difficult to describe. And this is the reason why it's really important, I guess, that in Playwork, we do talk about this definition and how we view play so that we can talk to other people about what we mean when we talk about play as Playworks. Mm. That moves us nicely on, right?
Yeah, this is a quote from a playworker named Gordon Sturrock, and it says, "Trying to define play is like trying to define love. You can't do it. It's too big for that." And I think there's something really true in that quote, something very beautiful, because of the way that both play and love are like part of what it means to be human, part of what it means to be in the world. And I think both of them are connected in the sense that I have of when are we really living?
Yeah. Yeah. I sometimes think about play as the glitter in life. And sometimes people also talk about how play is part of thriving. So throughout the pandemic, everybody has just been surviving. But if we play, we have a chance of actually thriving throughout the process. It's all been hard. I'm not gonna lie here, and I know that you folks in Turkey feel the same way. It's been awful. We all know. But if we play, we have a chance of making it slightly better for ourselves.
Yeah. I've been thinking about that, the way that play, however people define it in their own lives, whether that's time to go for a walk or to do something physical or something creative or whatever it is, how a little bit of play can get you through the day, right? A little bit of play is necessary to surviving. But when we can give it more time, more space, then that's when that survival strategy becomes thriving, right? That's when we can enjoy it.
Yeah.
In the same way that like you need food, but you can also occasionally have a banquet.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Let's move on to the next slide for now, and let's talk about Playwork.
Yeah, so Playwork is a professional approach to supporting children's play that grew out of this thing that we'll talk about in a minute called the Adventure Playground Movement. It particularly developed, and that's where both of us have studied it and learned more about it. And in the UK, this approach known as Playwork has developed a set of principles. The document that you can see here, I don't know that it's been translated into Turkish, but it
Not
is
yet.
available in English online. And it's a useful document. It's not perfect, but it speaks to what makes Playwork specific. And that really is about our focus on children's play.
Now, we haven't made, in this presentation, we are not talking about the Playwork principles. We just put it here to show you that they exist. We actually want to show you one very specific quote from the Playwork principles, which will be in the next slide. And that quote is, "Play is a process that is freely chosen, personally directed, and intrinsically motivated." I am so sorry, translator person, if that's really difficult, because it is. I personally find these words very frustrating because they're very long. They actually all roughly mean the same thing, and sometimes just a bit too fancy for what it needs to be. So there is another slide that we can talk through this. Play is a process that is freely chosen. That means when they want. And then personally directed means how they want. Intrinsically motivated means for their own reasons. Simply put, play should be when they want, how they want, however they want.
Mm-hmm.
This is how playworkers see play, a process that they can choose all parts of that process. It's the child's choice, the player's choice.
And we think this is particularly important right now, because, I mean, at least where I am, just to speak from the US, there are very few chances for most children to do what they want to do when and how and with whom they want to do it. Yeah. There's a lot of adult attention telling them like where to go and what to do and how to do it well. And a lot of that, like that can be absolutely appropriate and necessary. But I think increasingly it's become all the time in most of their lives. So Playwork, we view ourselves as, you know, one of many adults in a child's life. And that's our specific focus is on creating opportunities and holding space for them to be free.
Yeah, because these things, when we talk about it as when you want, how you want, and for your own reasons, that seems very simple. And actually, sometimes we often say, well, it seems like a waste of time. Why do they need to have time to do whatever they want? They're only children. It's not necessary. But let me ask, adults, if somebody tells you to do something 24/7, you must go and go to work now. You must only do your work. Can't do anything else. Now you must go home. You must make your dinner. Now you must brush your teeth. Now you must go to bed. That is a frustrating process, and we don't allow our children to make any choices throughout that day. Children don't even get to pick their lunch. We adults get to pick our lunch most of the time. I mean, you know, up to a point, but we get to decide which way to go to work. We get to decide what clothes we want to wear. We get to make decisions. And very often children don't have any choices. And this extends to their play as well. And when we don't get to make those choices and don't get to play, we are not thriving. You know, it's like, that's not what we want for our children.
Yeah, there's a concept of the third space that I think about in terms of children's play sometimes. And the idea is that, you know, for most of us, less now that we're all just at home all the time, but, or that many people are. But the idea of a third place is that people hopefully have a home and hopefully have a place to go to work. But a third place is the one that you choose, whether that is a bowling club or knitting with friends or the pub or whatever it is. But it is the place that you choose to go to, where you make friends that are unconnected to the rest of your life, perhaps. And that third place is so closely related to like mental and physical health, but also community. That's where people build community.
That community is really big, and it's the reason why during lockdown a lot of adults were very deeply sad that they couldn't go to their favorite tea store to have a drink with their friend, or they couldn't go to their favorite restaurant to eat with their family. It's because they didn't have their third space. But now that the pandemic has been going on for some time, a lot of people now begin to recognize that their third space is the internet, where we are now. And it's not a great substitute because it's not physically, we don't go anywhere. But it has offered us the opportunity to do stuff like this. So we can't complain. We just ran a conference for 20 different countries in 6 different languages, and we wouldn't have been able to do it if the pandemic was not here and people were not getting good at Zoom. But here we are, and it's not a great substitute, but it does offer us new opportunities, and we'll make it work for us for now.
Yeah, and I think that's part of what we've been seeing. That's where play can come in, right? When we need to imagine our third spaces, when we need to like find other ways of connecting and other ways of enjoying being together.
So what's important about play is probably the question that we're asking, because I did just say, it's important. We both have just said it's important, but why? And there are so many reasons, and actually there's so many that we can't name, but we're going to try and name them today because, as I said before, a lot of people make us write things down a lot, and so we're going to come up with a few with some stories. Actually, let's tell them some stories. So this photo is taken in Canada, near Edmonton. Morgan and I went to visit when we were traveling across Canada. It was very exciting. I love this photo because there's so many children doing so many different things, but everyone's using the same object, actually. And that is a soccer goalpost. Can you see that white thing there? All these children were at our play session, and we could feel a need that they had to climb. And the space didn't really offer any spaces to climb. So we looked at this goalpost and thought, what can we do? So we tied some fabric over the top. One of them has a tire hanging from underneath. And suddenly a space that was reasonably flat and had no height had height, and children began to climb. So in this picture, why is play so important? It's because they are exploring different space. They are climbing, so they're working their physical bodies. They are spinning. They are experiencing things from a different perspective, from higher up. They are sitting inside the fabric and feeling a closed space. That's important for children too. There's a lot of negotiating because there's only 5 spots on this thing, and there's about 8 children. There's a lot of discussion, communication, feeling different fabrics and materials. This kept these children busy for about 2 hours. And it is only fabric and a bunch of stuff that didn't really need anything. These are called loose parts. We can talk more about them later. But play can offer these things.
And what this so even from the same materials, so many different possibilities, because children were given a chance to be inventive, right? And throughout all of these opportunities too, what they're also doing is learning how to know what they want, what kinds of experiences they need, and then creating those opportunities for themselves. And that's a really remarkable thing to be able to take forward into your life. And
yeah, this is not possible if we big adults are there telling them what to do. If you notice in this picture, there is only one adult there. Well, and there's me, the person taking the picture. Yeah, it's just often it doesn't require any adult to be doing anything. This new picture is great. I love this new picture. Also taken in Canada. The lady in the middle spent about an hour dragging the children around. Like, I think it was 12 children around on that blue sheet. And it was getting tiring. I thought it was really funny, but the children loved it. They thought this was the best day ever. It was wet as well, so they got quite quick. It got quite fast and quite muddy. But then after about an hour, all of a sudden, and I watched this happen, somehow the children just pushed the teacher into the blue thing, and then they started dragging her around. And it just made me laugh so much, because can you see her face? She's just like, she's so happy but so scared at the same time. And I think that tradition, that transition is amazing, because it's so those children trust that adult to drag them around on that sheet, and suddenly the adult has decided to trust the children to drag her around on that sheet. That relationship that can be built in play is so important, and it's so much deeper than what we can possibly imagine. So, and it's something that can be developed with you and your children too, if you choose to trust them in this way.
Yeah, that's really lovely. You do often see play workers moving differently than other adults, I think, through and around children's play. We'll very often, like in this, allow ourselves.
I can't hear you anymore, Morgan. Where did you go? Did you click something? There you go, you're back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, great. Then these. Okay. Great.
That's funny. Let's go to the next slide. The next slide is a photo from Costa Rica. We went to visit there a few years ago when we journeyed around the world visiting countries. And Costa Rica was our second stop. And it was a really great location. These folks have been doing play sessions there for a number of years already. At this particular event, there were 300 children in a two-hour play session. We call them pop-up adventure playgrounds. It's a very long translating word to translate. We're very sorry. But these pop-up adventure playgrounds are spaces where children just can come, they can play, they can do whatever they want, and the adults are there to support them. And in this particular photo, it demonstrates a very strong play community. These are people who know the organizers and they trust them to find a great space, and they all arrive and they play. And they've been doing it quite regularly for the last few years. And you can see that they've got some really interesting things to play with as well. And it just develops such a wonderful sense of community in a space that I don't know that I've experienced in any other kind of community, any other type of event. Play seems to have a really great way of bringing people together, overlooking many of their differences, just to come together and do something. And yeah, it can be peace building, I think, in the community.
There are many different many different types of play. Theorists have made lists, in short.
Right.
Some of the lists are very short, some of the lists are very long. We tend to use in Playwork this list, which is Hughes's list of 16 play types. And it includes a variety of terms that may be familiar to people who have watched children's play, such as rough and tumble, which can mean like wrestling, social play, creative play, fantasy play, all sorts of different expressions. And this tool provides an interesting way of appreciating the many expressions of that instinct for play. And for us as professionals to look at an environment and see what it does or does not provide.
I think this list is, again, unnecessarily complicated, but we wouldn't expect you to translate all of these 16 play types. It's just too many. The thing to take away from this particular slide is that there is more than one way to play. And I say this because now, ladies and gentlemen out there, if we tell you to imagine play, how many of you imagine smiling children running through a meadow, and there might be a rainbow overhead, and maybe a unicorn, and flowers, and everyone's happy and dancing? How many of you are imagining this? I mean that I'm just joking. This obviously doesn't happen very often, but there is that visualization that children only play happily and like in a meadow for some reason. And that's true. If you really watch a child at play, it's very serious. And yeah, of course they smile, but there's a lot of things going on, and it can be really deep, it can be really difficult, and genuine as well in so many ways. And sometimes we have that habit of thinking about play very superficially, but it runs much deeper than that. And this is all that this slide is basically saying to you. There are lots of things that play is, and we're still exploring what they are as researchers, so we're still working on that. But children have a handle on that. They know what they need. These are some of the things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's, as you say, play can look very different. It certainly isn't everybody smiling all of the time, playing nicely, which is what they always love to say in the US.
Play nice.
Play nice. Play nice. Anyway. But I think that idealism, that ideal of play that you're talking about is present in Playwork too. Our definition of freely chosen, personally directed, intrinsically motivated is also idealistic.
Very ideal.
Children are realistically, children are making decisions and compromises all the time about from what they want to do and who they want to do it with. And we see them make those very complex calculations and negotiations all the time. The important thing for us is to make sure that they get to make those decisions themselves and that they have many great options to choose from. Because if you don't, if your options are very narrow, then it's not as rewarding. A good play environment, including the temporary ones, the pop-ups that you just saw pictures of, I think why they're so successful and why they encourage such good community relationships is because when you arrive, they feel like anything is possible. It feels like a place where you are free to try things, and maybe it will work and maybe it will fall over, and you can laugh either way. And that's the kind of environment that we want to create, the kind of environment in which so many different expressions of play and experiences become possible for children and for their families and for strange, for surprising adults who wander through and are like, what is this? What is either? I was just getting lunch.
I think that's a perfect segue into this new slide. Pop-up adventure play. Morgan and I believe that play can happen as long as there's time, space, and permission. And these three things are quite important. They do change. The parameters of time, space, and permission do change depending on a number of things, usually the situation. But without those three, without one of those three, it doesn't quite work as well. An example might be helpful here. Playing in a park. Okay, a public park, it has a slide, it has a swing, it has a, I don't know what you call them, a roundabout, goes round and round and round. Sometimes, we have the space here, okay? It's a park. We get it. There's probably a fence around it so the children can't run into the road. The parents feel quite safe, so they'll let the children run around. And this time they are there for how many minutes after school, doing whatever. Sometimes the thing that is missing from these three things is permission. I don't know if you folks have the same experience as I do when I go to the park, but there's often lots of people there saying, no, you can't do this. Oh, wait. Oh, no, it's not your turn yet. No, don't go over there. No, you're going too fast. Oh, no, don't shout. How many people feel this when they're in a park? There is not always permission to play in a park. That is upsetting but true. I often also feel very judged when I'm at the park, especially because I don't have my own children. So I'm taking someone else's children now, and they're like, who are you? Whose children have you stolen? But that's a different thing. It's that permission piece that is actually the hardest one out of the three of these that we often talk about, because allowing people to have permission to play is really hard. It's actually really hard for us. I'm looking straight at you. It's hard for us to give ourselves permission to play. So while we can say to children, yes, go and play in the garden, come back in half an hour, you can do whatever you want. Do you really mean that is one real question. And the second one is that, can you also do something for yourself or your own reasons for half an hour and not judge yourself for that? Do you give yourself permission? Some big questions today. Sorry, I put the finger out. I didn't mean to.
You did. I know. You put that finger away, talking about bossy adults and waving your finger.
Sorry.
Stop it. Stop having fun.
I will stop having fun. Well, I mean, speaking of fun, Morgan and I, we're doing PhD. I mentioned this already. Actually, we've just finished. But our professor is Fraser Brown here, the only professor of playwork in the whole world. And he thinks that we, to have play, we need fun, freedom, and flexibility. He actually calls it compound flexibility, but that's not something I want anyone to translate. So we're just going to stick to these three words for now.
And these are also like three main benefits from children's play. If you are looking to advocate for children's play and Google benefits of play, you will find any number of studies and lists of the educational and social and physical, all these different benefits of play. And what children really are craving right away are opportunities for fun, for freedom, and to develop their flexibility. That's what we see.
Yeah, and Fraser also says that the more flexible a space is, the more more opportunities that children have to develop. This is the compound bit that we were talking about before, but it is fundamental to children's development that we give them an opportunity to play constantly all the time. Yep.
Well, and it's what they're trying to do. As
Yeah.
soon as a child is not actively hungry, tired, cold, or afraid, they start looking around for opportunities to play.
Yep.
And you don't always recognize necessarily that that's what they're doing, because it can look a lot like them just like poking the world. But it is that curiosity, and that interest, that desire to like participate in the world. And I think sometimes it can be frustrating for adults, because if we don't see that they're trying to play and maybe getting frustrated by a lack of opportunities, we think they're just trying to annoy us. Very easy to assume that that's what's happening, because if they don't have something else to play with, they will begin to play with us in that way of like, what will you do if I get you annoyed enough?
Oh yeah.
Really mean that. So what Playwork offers for me anyway, personally, is a framework for how to be a different kind of adult.
Yeah. So in context, play work is a field of practice and research as well. That means that there's people who are employed as play workers, and that is their professional title. But there are also people who are researching it and constantly growing that field. Morgan and I believe, are both of these people. And we both work directly with people in Playwork, and also trying to find ways of improving so that more people can access it. We are working with folks in Turkey to develop Playwork in Turkish, so it's very exciting. So we will continue to do that and get more accessible. And I think if you ask every play worker, they will have a different thing that they enjoy about Playwork. And for me, specifically, I like how Playwork is accepting of difference in so many things. As a Chinese person, you figured this out now. I'm Chinese, but I was born in the UK. Playwork means that I don't decide if I am Chinese, but it also takes into account my experiences as a human being as I work as a play worker. And I don't know that many fields that are okay with this happening. You know, I don't know that many fields that don't ask you to conform to their rules to be the professional that you need to be. And I hope that once you hear more about Playwork, that you might also agree to.
So at the beginning, I mentioned this idea of an adventure playground. They are more or less permanent sites that exist all around the world now. The very first one was in Copenhagen during the Second World War. It's called MDRIP.
Yeah, so they've a relatively long history, but we should explain what they are. Originally, they were called junk playgrounds, junk as in, rubbish, because kids played with discarded objects in a space. But later on, they were changed to adventure playgrounds, a more accurate description of what actually happens on that space. In the UK, it really took off thanks to a lady called Lady Eleanor Hurtwood. And she pushed it so far that there were hundreds of adventure playgrounds in the UK, even in London itself. There was just already hundreds, which is crazy because I can't even imagine where you'd put them all. But this photo is from Meriden Adventure Playground in Birmingham in the UK. And as you can see, this is a very particular look that adventure playgrounds have. They're usually all wooden, and they're usually structures with different height platforms. I say usually because that's not true for every adventure playground, but you can almost always feel one. There's like a vibe about it because it feels like a child made it. And usually a child did, several children, in fact, and they will come up with the ideas on what, and adults will help them put these the large structures together. And they're just a space of possibility, and it is wonderful. Shall we talk about more of them?
Yes,
Should.
yes, we should. We should. This is another newer, one of the newer generation of adventure playgrounds. It became a bit more famous than adventure playgrounds usually are because of a short documentary called The Land by Aaron Davis. It's also Googleable.
Yes, find it on Google.
Yeah. It's a 20-minute video that follows children through this space. And it brings you much closer to a child's experience, to a child's perspective of this space, which can look like trash to adults. and that's not unintentional. On that original list of time, space, and permission, it doesn't include materials, right? It doesn't say stuff or junk, but you see a lot of it in these pictures. You see like old tires and pieces of wood and strange things. And part of why they're here is to give permission so that it feels like a space that is exciting and different and maybe a place that you can be a little bit.
I think that a lot of the work that Playwork can do, certainly what I feel Morgan and I are trying to do quite a lot, is to find ways to say yes. Yes, you can play here. Yes, you can use that box. Yes, you can cut that thing in half. Yeah, and in this space here on the land, yes, you can use it however you want. You can stand in the river. You can climb the fence. You can swing on that yellow thing, whatever it is. Possibilities, and that permission is really important. Ooh, let's do another one, Morgan. This is a more temporary adventure playground that's based in the US. Our friend Kelsey runs it, and it's lovely. Morgan knows. Morgan's been.
It's true. It's in a field behind a school, and it's an after-school program. So they have access to this big open space and storage with lots of material. And then after all of the teachers go home, they take the stuff out and build and rush and whatever they please all afternoon.
Yeah. And then they have to tidy up. This is the problem with the temporary space. It still functions and as an adventure playground. Kids go and have adventure, and something that Morgan and I like to talk about quite a lot with people is that adventure is in the mind of the child. A quote from Drummond Abernethy, and he said, "Adventure is in the mind of the child," and it's true. It doesn't matter what the adventure playground looks like, as long as the children are doing what they need to do on there, it's awesome. Here's a classic example of what that might look like.
Yeah. There's also a question from the chat that I would like to bring in at this point.
And then we whiz through a couple more, Morgan.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. The question is, I see an overprotective attitude towards children at parks. How do you take precautions against parents' interventions? And that's a really great question. At adventure playgrounds, the more permanent sites that we're talking about right now, parents aren't there for the most part.
No adults.
So that's historically how Playwork has managed parents, by fences, by the use of fences. However, a lot of our work is really focused on building community. around play. So doing public events with parents welcome, unfenced. And we want to encourage parents to practice different ways of being with their children at play. And we try and resist the temptation to judge whenever possible, because we don't know if this is the most playful that parent is with their child. We have no context.
We have no context at all. So that parent that may be the only day that parent has seen that child. That might be the most relaxed that person can be. And we recognize that parents are an important part of the playground now. And in spaces that are not adventure playgrounds, just your average park with the swings and the slides, there will be a whole range of parents, and that's going to happen. And some are really nervous, some may have had a really bad experience on a slide, and we have to understand that not everybody will think the same way as us. And the best way to engage those people is to talk to them. I'm not going to lie here, see how they are. Maybe they're having a really bad day. Maybe they haven't slept very well. Maybe the newborn baby hasn't stopped crying for 5 days. It's one of those. And Playwork is a lot about compassion and understanding that people have their own stories that we can't possibly understand, but they're still going through those. And if their way of working isn't gelling with the way that you're working, maybe move to a different location and try in the middle of the woods. Nobody judges you there. But in the park, it is often an issue.
Wow, you're very visible there.
Yeah. Let's do another slide. We can't do any presentation without mentioning adventure play in Texas. Everybody remember this one because it is amazing. And yes, children made this structure. And our friend Jill Wood runs this space. It's beautiful. It's part of a school where all the children have very special needs.
It's true. Yeah, every child at this school has one or several diagnosed learning or language-based differences. And part of why I wanted to bring in the parent piece is because something that the staff at this site do very well is build relationships with the parents, specifically around the children's play. So they might say, "Oh, I noticed your kid do this amazing thing." So they're reinforcing with the parents that play is valuable and that they see those children thriving. And that can also be a way of supporting, the parents.
Yeah. We have lots of stories about that site. We're going to have to.
We do. And lots of stories about parents. Whereas it has to be different at every site, right? Because your relationships are different at every site. So this one, for example, the Yard Adventure Playground is in New York City, which has a different culture than Texas in a lot of different ways. So the way that this place dealt with the parents was putting a sign up that said, "Your children are fine without your helpful suggestions."
I love that sign.
This is very New York. But they also have, like, with the children that come again and again, they also build different relationships.
Yeah.
Of trust.
This adventure playground is on an island, and the only way to get there is by ferry. And this is a very special place because there's not that many adventure playgrounds and on an island. But that also means that people don't live in this space. We will talk about. Actually, I can build this in now. So it's really like the question that has just come through now is how we can navigate, let's say, safety with all these scraps. Okay, it looks dangerous, and I'm going to, I don't need to ask you. I know if we ask you to put your hands up, there's like 100 of you here. How many of you feel uncomfortable with all these bits of wood? And I know that there will be some who are like, oh, isn't it really dangerous? The thing of it is, if a child makes the space and they make it, and when they take charge of that space, there are far less injuries. And if we go back to the previous location, why not, Morgan? Let's go to the previous slide. Morgan and Jill, the site owner, they did a study here about the risk of injury on this site compared to a slides and swings playground. And guess what, everybody? There is more chance of you getting injured on a slide and swing playground than there is in this kind of space. On adventure playgrounds, children do their own risk assessments, and it means that they move around their space more cautiously, and they're thinking and assessing, and we're trusting them with those assessments, and they actually get injured less. The only times when they got injured on an adventure playground was when an adult intervened, when an adult started going, hey, what you doing? And somebody fell off something.
Yeah, it's true. This adventure playground was more than 4 times safe in terms of like risk of injury per child per hour of play. And that's partly because on conventional playgrounds, children get bored, and because they never change the playgrounds. The children are changing all the time, but the playgrounds are fixed. So they get bored. They do things that the designer never imagined, right? They climb up on top and they do all of these things. And because they can't change them, they have to go right to the top rather than building platforms the way that this shows. And it just becomes much more dangerous. Part of what makes adventure playgrounds exciting is that they feel a little bit dangerous. So children are a little bit careful. They're paying attention differently. The other thing is that we do go around and remove genuinely dangerous items. We distinguish between, well, we have 2 words for this, of risk and hazard. But the main thing is to create a distinction between potentially dangerous things that the children can see and navigate and manage, and the things that they can't see. So for example, with this structure, adults will go in at the beginning and end of sites and make sure that if it looks strong enough for the children to stand on top, that it is strong enough for the children to stand on top. So we might put in more screws. We might, if we see screws coming down at weird angles, then we might like bend things back or remove them. So we do like some secret work in adventure playgrounds.
Yeah, even though we talk a lot about giving permission and letting them play, we quietly go in and do little risk assessments to make sure that there are no hidden scary things happening. And that's what we would call a risk assessment, and then also risk benefit assessments. Morgan and I could probably do another workshop on that. So we will have to call that here for now, but we can talk more about that later. And we're seeing a couple more questions come through about playground stuff. Let us shelve that for a second, and we'll come back to them in a minute when we talk more about other play spaces. So this photo was taken in Turkey. We wanted to put one photo in here. We did a pop-up adventure playground inside a school. I don't remember where we are, but we crossed a really big body of water in a bus, and then I got really seasick and stopped paying attention. But it was a really nice location to do something interesting and new, and the children were really receptive of being in this space and playing with all this stuff. And I will tell you right now, there were no instructions here. I couldn't give any because all the children spoke Turkish and I don't. But they still understood completely when they arrived in space. We were standing there going, here you go. And the children just did. Children know what to do, and they don't need instructions to play. They just do. And it is something wonderful. This is your picture, Morgan. So you go.
So play ranging is another application of Playwork, when we would take ordinary materials out into public space, and we would go repeatedly. So every Tuesday for a year, for example. And the idea was that we would rebuild relationships between the children who, some of them weren't allowed out of the house unattended. And also with the families, because when adults trust one another, children are allowed out more.
Yeah, so Morgan and I were both play rangers when we started in this field. This is not together. Morgan was on one project, I was in another. But something that was quite wonderful about this is that we were taught to trust the children and their needs and their instincts, and then to also meet the needs of the community that we found them in. And it was really for me, it was really interesting how often those two things were the same. The community actually wants the children to do something, and the children want to do something, and usually play is the solution. And one of those things is play ranging kind of helps assist that to happen in many occasions. Just reclaiming space for children to play. A good document, by the way, if you ever Google that. The next slide, I like this project. This particular project I did in Scotland with a friend. What happened is that they had a big container, a shipping container, and they put it in a playground, filled it with stuff, trained all the people in the school to use the stuff and the container, and then every lunchtime they would open the container up and the children would play with the stuff. And then when break time was over, they put all the things back into the container, and then they went about their school day. Now, PlayPods is not it's not my project. It started in Bristol, but the idea is very interesting, to put a box worth of stuff in a space and then let children play with it, step back and allow them to happen. It's a really great model that shows community in a completely different way, because school is a community too, and why not support play in that community, right? So PlayPods are an interesting model that you might want to be researching for your school too. Oh, I get to talk again. In 2 years ago, I was given a shop. It was an old hairdresser's that was in my local town, and I turned it into a pop-up play shop. I cannot take all of the credit for this, because Morgan did the first ever pop-up play shop, and then we wrote a toolkit. I still have that somewhere. A toolkit that you can use to create more of these spaces in your neighborhoods. And children just come in and they play, but it feels like a shop. Where you would normally have your hair cut or buy some apples, but instead you go in and you can decorate the Christmas tree and and then build a robot. It's a really great place and a really interesting model for inserting play into an unusual community. And this time it is the retail community. So yes, if you're interested in finding out ways to create unusual models of play, this is one really great example.
And pop-up adventure playgrounds, which
we've
been talking about. And we developed this model as an introduction for communities and for play advocates who maybe didn't have a lot of experience with this yet, who had not had the chance to playground or to learn more about Playwork. We wanted people to have a place to start. And again, we have seen that if people bring materials and welcome visitors into public space, that beautiful things happen. It just works. We provide a lot of long distance support to independent organizers who email us again and again, worried that they don't have enough stuff, worried that nobody will come, worried that there will be a lot of violence between children. And like sometimes there are fights that you need to put a stop to. Sometimes you need to call your friends who have children first and make sure that they get there and make it look really good before other people arrive. Like, there are those barriers. But again and again, it just works because everybody is invested. Which this touches a little bit on a question that somebody raised about age ranges. There was a question about can 4-year-olds and 12-year-olds play together when you have, or when you have large families and lots of them and many children of a wide age range, does it work? And I have seen it work wonderfully.
Oh, yeah.
To let people be mixed, to let ages be mixed. Very, very, very small children are often contained by parents so that they don't wander into something and get trampled. But having a mix of ages is part of what makes it work. So for example, the 4-year-olds and 12-year-olds that somebody asked about, those 12-year-olds who might be tempted to go really hard to run and smash and have big loud play, they will often moderate that when they're 4-year-olds and shift towards supporting them or building something for them or just being a little bit more gentle and careful because their little brother is there than they would be if there was just adults telling them to be quiet.
Yeah, we are fully on board with mixed age group play because this is how children build their own cultures, communities. If we keep separating them off into age, like the 5-year-olds, 6-year-olds, they only grow up with one another. They don't actually learn any of the naughty things that the older children have learnt. So there's no passing of children's cultures. There's no community. We want them to mix, and it's something quite wonderful about seeing a 4-year-old. Oh, you're playing with me. You're so much bigger. And then that older person going, oh yes, I'm being worshipped. Let's play together. Have you seen that dynamic? It's so wonderful. And then they are the unlikely, partnership, and they play together. That is beautiful right there. The next generation of parents are right there. So if you don't let them play with one another, how will they be able to do that? Anyway, pop-up adventure playgrounds are the things that we do, and I guess they're one of the things we do as pop-up play. We provide a lot of these types of online support workshops for folks. We also do that in person when we can travel again with that. We have been for over 10 years now supporting individuals all over the world in 30 different countries, just by email or by video chat. Just tell us what's happening. We offer as much advice as possible and then help them make friends with other advocates that are doing the same thing. So pop-up adventure play is really striving to bring the world together in play in as many languages as possible, as many races and religions and cultures as possible. And so if you have an idea or if you want support in any way, just reach out to us. We will do what we can to make things work for you.
We locate or we understand all of our work in relationship to children's human rights. The United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child covers a lot of ground. It encompasses many different rights to family and housing and education, all sorts of things, and play. It includes the right to play. Of course, I am saying that from the only country that hasn't signed it, but the US has not signed this convention, but everybody else has, basically, I think. And it names the right to play as something that children can claim.
To be clear, the rights of the child, the UNCRC, as we call it, are specifically drafted, written rights that children have. They're human rights documents as well. They're all about adults. They don't talk about kids for some reason. So these ones are just about children. And it's actually, if you ever get the chance to Google this and have a look, they're really interesting because it's things that you would take for granted. For example, a right to a name, right to a family, right to education and health. Those are pretty obvious things. But there are also things that can be a little bit controversial. For example, a right to believe whatever they want to, a right to make friends with whoever they want to, a right to choose, and obviously the right to play. It doesn't seem like it makes much sense, and actually it feels a little bit scary that our children can make friends with whoever they want to. What happens if it's a bad person? That's what we'll always think. But there's some simple examples in play that can like make you feel slightly less worried about that. For example, if a kid comes up to me and tells me that they are a dragon and that they can breathe fire and that they have lots of dragon friends, they believe that, they have chosen that, and they are making friends with 10 dragons. You know, those are very simple things, right? But that's happened. You can see that in play, and they've chosen to play as well, and they have every right to do all of those things. So all we're saying here is that Pop-Up Adventure Play chooses the United Nations Conventions of the Rights of a Child as one of our fundamental belief systems, I want to say. These rights are things that we believe in. And we hope that as we grow, as we talk more about this stuff, that more people can realize that play is located within.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's not a perfect document.
No.
By any means. But
hard to enforce.
Well, yes. I mean, there are a few different, that's a whole other presentation.
Yes.
It's not a perfect document, but what it does do is remind us to take children seriously as people, as citizens right now, not as future people or future citizens, but today, what they believe and what they think and what they need.
Yep. Awesome.
We overcommitted on slides. No.
No, we can do this.
So one of the things that we wanted to do was provide a little bit of language for when you're next observing children at play. As play workers, we think about play for its own sake and in its own processes. So some of the language that we use borrows a little bit from the theatre. So we talk about play cues or invitations or prompts. A cue is something that comes from a child or an adult or an object that invites an engagement. So a simple play cue from a child might be just that moment when like they look over their shoulder and they run and they giggle and they look and they run and they giggle, right? Like you know that they want you to chase them. And if you do chase them, that's the return. That is you saying yes to their cue. What happens then is the construction together of a play frame. And that frame is the rules or the roles, the game, essentially, of what you are doing together. Sometimes it's also called a magic circle, but it's the space, the imaginative space within which you are deciding that the world can be different. That I will be the monster, you will be running and afraid, and then maybe after 10 minutes we'll switch. Who knows? But it's the space.
So in the hour and a half that you are with us today, it would be impossible to turn you all into play workers. We would love that to happen. but you need both theory and practice. And I can't fit that in right now. I'm not in Turkey. I can't do it in practice with you. But these phrases, these terms, play cues, play returns, and play frames are really helpful. Sometimes just when we're talking about play with one another, with our families and in work. We have a lot of them. And we're going to tell you about one more in a minute that is probably the most controversial and funny. I think it's a funny one. But these are words that are really, they've just been really helpful and almost revolutionary in us talking about children's play, because it gives us that language, that shared language, to be able to talk with one another about what we're seeing when children are doing what they're doing. So the next one.
Well, I also just want to say one other quick thing. That this language has been particularly helpful for me when working with children who are struggling with play in one way or another, because it helps us be more specific in saying, okay, like this child has trouble recognizing other children's cues. And then we have a different sense of how we can help.
Yeah, being able to label stuff, not in an unhelpful way, it's just a common shared language. And one of those is the word adulteration, not to be confused by any other word like that, but adulteration literally means to adult something. So when for example, in this photo, it looks like a really great photo, kids sat in a tub with an adult next to them, but actually this adult spent the last 10 minutes going, sit in the bucket, please, sit in the bucket. Okay, come on, please sit in the bucket. And this person, this adult, has adulterated this moment because that child did not want to sit in the bucket. The adult was just making. But this happens a lot in children's play. We accidentally take our big adult selves and then try and control a play situation, and then take away from the children's thing, make it not theirs. And it's something to be more aware of. When children are playing, just let them play. Don't ask them too many questions. And then if you need to do something, put on there something like a cloak of invisibility, or as I like to put it, just be a ninja, and then just go around the edge and then do it quietly. Change a thing, remove a trip hazard, give someone a bucket, do it quietly and let the play carry on, because it isn't necessary to always make a song and dance about it and be the adults on a space.
Instead of listening to our first impulses, which might be to get ourselves involved in what is happening or give children unsolicited praise or whatever it might be, I think we all have these like first instincts, right? Instead, in Playwork, we want to reflect and to pause and think before we step in, before we intervene. And instead of those first instincts, to really make sure that when we are involved in children's play, it is at an appropriate level. Like, we want to be as subtle as possible. We sometimes talk about having a light touch. So in the examples that Suzanna gave, if we see that a child is nearly out of tape, we might bring tape and put it near them. Suzanna talked about dropping off a bucket. We might give them what we think they could need, but we don't necessarily interrupt them to be like, hello, everybody, we brought this. Hello, you're welcome. We might just put it there casually. And that's a small example, but it's a shift. It's a shift in approach for a lot of us.
Yeah. And the reason why we put this slide up is just to say that there are lots of different ways of intervening. Our gut instinct as adults is just to stop children's play. Something is happening. Alert the authorities. We're like, nope, this cannot continue any further. But play workers are encouraged to think about some other slightly less aggressive approaches to interrupting children's play.
Yeah, we might come in from the side or make ourselves like lower or quieter. A very common thing that happens at pop-up adventure playgrounds is a child who wants to smash the cardboard boxes and the forts that other children have made. And it can be tempting to tell them to stop. Instead, as an example, what a playworker might do is go up beside them and say, "Oh, you're really good at smashing boxes. Do you want to help me smash this other one over here?" And you're working with what they want to do, but bringing them to a place where it is safe to do that. Just for an example, when we, as Suzanna said, we always want to say yes. Sometimes that means saying yes if. Yes, you can do that if it's over here.
Yep. And as Morgan has just said now in the intervention section, the very important thing that we need to do when intervening is to reflect upon what we're about to do before we do it. And that reflection piece runs throughout all of Playwork. We basically spend a lot of our time thinking about our actions before we do stuff. I think not only is this helpful for Playwork, it should be helpful for life, but I'm not going to go about telling you how to run your life. So I'm just going to talk to you about Playwork for now. And this is interesting because if you're doing reflection right, it's a kind of uncomfortable. And as a Chinese person living in the UK, gosh, it's like one of the most conservative cultures talking to another culture that hates talking about uncomfortableness. And I haven't been brought up to talk about my feelings, but it is really important for me to do. So I'm learning with Morgan, who is brought up in a slightly more feelingsy culture.
True. My childhood was in Southern California, where we talked about feelings all the time. But it is a simple example of how the cultural differences and training that we both have informs our relationship, and has taught both of us different ways of being with other adults and with different kinds of children and all sorts of things. Reflection is often done after the play session, after the moment that did or did not go the way that you expected. And I also just want to say that it is normal for things to go a little bit wrong, or for your intervention not to result in the change that you had hoped. It takes practice. But that being able to reflect in any way that you can, whether that's written or drawing or talking with friends or going for a long run until you feel better and can't quite explain why, like whatever it might be, that lets you take the lessons that you can from the day and then let go of the rest, are incredibly important, both for your Playwork practice and to help make play advocacy more sustainable. It can be very tiring work, and taking time to be with your feelings, however that works for you, makes all the difference.
I cannot emphasize how important it is also to be with a trusting team of people, because as I learned to express my feelings, I don't think I could have done it if it wasn't a supportive person like Morgan to be walking me through that. So I really hope that you're able to find a supportive team of people to discuss your play stuff with, and to find, if not a person nearby, to be able to tap into an excellent community of people who can walk you through that. Which I guess brings us to the next slide of the Playwork community. Look at all these lovely, happy little faces that you see in this slide. These are the people who joined us for Camp Bruns 2019. They are the international Playwork community that we have going on here. That's not all of them. There's so many more, but these are the 105 that could come to 2019's conference that we hosted. There are a lot of Playworkers out there, and those are people who care about play. And we cannot encourage you enough to go and find some of the people. And if you want to reach out to Morgan and myself, and we'll find you a friend. That's how we roll. And we want people to not be working alone in this. It's very lonely. To be the only person in your community talking about why play is important is incredibly humbling, really lonely, and we've been don't want this to happen to anyone else. So here we are saying we want to be your friend, and we will find you a friend as well. And there's many resources that we can help find in that journey. So we've talked a lot today, and it's only been what 1 hour and 20 minutes. You might have some questions, or something might have spoken to you today. So I know there's a little bit of a delay while you hear this, but what will you take home today? What was the thing that jumped out at you when we were talking today? Morgan, what have you been thinking about recently? Spotlight? Oh, shall I talk first? Sorry.
No, I've been thinking, it's not a very light ending point, but I have been thinking about the ways in which play is therapeutic and the ways in which a pandemic has been like a collective trauma. So I have been thinking about pop-up adventure playgrounds or similar work as ways to facilitate like community level healing with play.
Yeah. I've been thinking a lot about play in different cultures and beliefs and all of that, and how there are so many divisions in this world, but how everybody seems to have something in play that we get together in, and how play may be the great peacemaker of all things. I genuinely believe that if people played more, then there would be less war, but maybe that's just my naive way of thinking. But if we all played right from the beginning, not just now, I'm talking about like centuries ago, if we played more, then maybe we would have less war out there. Hey, I don't know. In what I see of children and how they're able to negotiate and make peace within their own play frames, I'm certain that if we can find a way that works for everybody. Someone's just asked how you can reach us. We will put our email address in the last slide in a minute, so you can find us there. I'm sure that the lovely folks organizing the conference can also supply that email contact to you as well. Did we have other questions? I can't read them.
I don't see any other questions.
Okay. So some very common questions that people do ask are regarding risk, and I think that a lot of you already asked about that. We Playworkers do a lot of risk assessments, and honestly, they're really helpful because help your brain think. It's us thinking with our hearts all the time, because in our hearts nobody wants our children to get injured, obviously, or experience any discomfort, but it's really important for them to experience things for themselves, so we can't take them away. So risks are important. And my favorite example of why risks are important is if you make a new friend, that's a risk. Right? Walking across a room and talking to a brand new person, stranger, and making a friend, that's really quite scary, but usually it's worth it. And that's how I will leave it for now in terms of risk. It isn't always physical, sometimes it's emotional, and more often than not, if it's calculated.
This is advice that we give to everybody who is interested in starting play projects or starting making change around play. There's a tendency that we have noticed among adults very often to make really elaborate plans and have this whole idea for what will be perfect. and then wait for it to be perfect before beginning. And we strongly advise not to do that. We say start the smallest way that you can think of to get started, whether that's calling a friend who might be interested or gathering materials in your basement, whatever it might be. So start really small and to start now, not to wait for the perfect moment, but instead to just keep going. Little changes all the time can build momentum, and inevitably play attracts other people. It just is very attractive. People want to be involved. And if you've already started small and been going for a little while, you're in a better position to welcome them into that.
Yep, indeed. Starting small is also really helpful for some of the questions that have come through. Morgan, some out, please.
Yes, I have seen that some children have difficulty using their imagination and experience stress in play that requires creativity. Have you encountered this situation? Yes, we definitely have. There's a very real problem of play deprivation, of lack of opportunities for children to play. And what we see very often is children who haven't had a lot of experience, who are scared or uncertain for where to begin. That is understandable because this is new for them. And I think one thing, just in this very short response, one thing that we can do is show that that is normal, like that it's okay, that they don't have to be that they don't have to be an artist right now. We can also allow for like messing around, for trying stuff and letting it go wrong. And we can model that ourselves. I really enjoy making bad art in front of children. And then there's often a moment when they're like, that duck is terrible. And I'm like, well, you make a better duck. And they're like, okay, or whatever makes sense for you. But I think a lot of children have been taught to be afraid of getting it wrong. And that's what we're really
that's the big one. Throughout Asia, this is a big issue that I've noticed when I've been traveling there. I know that a lot of kids are like, am I doing it right? And there's no right or wrong way to play. So the only real thing that we can do is reassure the children that everything's fine, and then set an example for what that might look like, even if it makes you look silly. Yes. There was another question about security, Morgan.
Yeah, an adventure park design. As an adventure park designer, security is very important to us. What do we think about it?
We think a lot about security. It doesn't feel like it because, the way we're dressed, the stuff we play with, but we do not want our children to get hurt for no reason, or at all, really. If we can avoid it, we should obviously do that. But in play, occasionally we get hurt, and that's okay. And it's dealing with that and moving forward from that is really important, and being able to minimize the effects of that. Additionally, additionally, if we always do risk assessments and make sure that we have kept place as safe as possible for the children. So often it means gates and fences, and there's no weird adults going into adventure playgrounds, for example. And certainly at public pop-up adventure playgrounds, we monitor who is coming, who is going, making sure there's no strangers, or if it's uncomfortable, we work together to make sure the situation is managed. So it's not a case of one of our radio interviews one time asked us if we just throw children into a bunch of sharp metal. We don't do that. That's not Playwork. What we do is carefully risk assess a site, make sure that it is safe, and then allow children to do what they need to in that space, and then carefully manage that.
Thank you so much for this time and opportunity to share with you some of what we love about Playwork. It would be, we've been so impressed by what we've seen like growing in Turkey, and would love to be involved going forwards however we can. So here are contact details. We love getting email.
Yes, please do email us, and don't be shy. We're very happy to hear from you. And Google Translate works very well now. So even if you can't use English, please do email us in Turkish and we'll make that happen. Don't worry. Or we will connect you with someone who speaks Turkish on our behalf. We are really, really pleased that you wonderful folk are here doing more stuff in Playwork. So I really hope that you keep learning more about play and keep playing for yourself as well. So thank you for having us, everybody. See you later.
Bye.